Top 10 Sanderson books. Number 10, Tress of the Emerald Sea. When I first started reading this book, I believed that this was going to be my new number 1 pick. It's still in the top 10, so it's really great. Just the concept of the spore oceans, the subtle prose that seems to ooze color off the page. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Even physically, the book is beautiful. But the issue was something that I really wasn't expecting. Unlike a vast majority, I really enjoyed each and every scene that I had read up until this point with Hoyd/Wit. I thought he added a lot to each and every scene that he was a part of. However, with this book, he becomes one of the main characters, plot point really. However, each and every moment that he was in it, he was super annoying. I think that this book would have been much better as a standalone. However, I think this was a refreshing change of pace compared to everything else in the Cosmere. It was beautiful. Number 9. Steelheart. You weren't expecting this one, were you? So this is the first book in the Reckoners trilogy, which is not in the Cosmere. It's a lesser known Sanderson book. The basic concept is that there is this star that's shown up in the sky, almost like a second sun. And ever since it's shown up, people randomly have been blessed or cursed with superpowers. However, all the people who have attained these superpowers, who are called epics, are horrible people. They all become supervillains. There are no superheroes. So the world is kind of cut off between these different domains of epics. And it's written in first person, which is interesting for Sanderson. I thought it was done really well. It's definitely YA. It's very purposefully in that bracket. However, I do think that it's less YA than Stormlight Archive at this point. The Cosmere has become YA. It wasn't before. There's some really great violent scenes in this. He doesn't hold back. The very first scene that we come in on, we're shown why the epics are so terrifying. A bunch of people are murdered in a bank by this guy who can just like point at people and they turn into like Infinity War dust, but they don't ever come back. These people don't ever come back. They're dead. Number 8. So this is where I might start pissing some people off. Oathbringer. Now, Oathbringer is a book I really like. However, this is when you start to feel some of the bloat. There's always been bloat in this. I mean, just the fact that it's epic fantasy, you have an expected epic word count. There are volumes in this series where it feels earned, and there are volumes in this series where it feels completely superfluous. Like it didn't need all these extra things going on. It's like the word count was padded. Now, I don't believe that this book was especially padded. I think that there's a lot here that is very significant. The flashbacks with Dolinar, one of my very favorite moments in all of the Cosmere, the fall of Kholinar. It's so tragic. You have some really significant character beats occurring here. Now, I will say that the ending bugged me a little bit. This is probably a pretty common criticism, I'd imagine, but there is a certain villain that's been brought up throughout several volumes here. You understand the psychology of him. You understand just how evil he is. You understand just how deep the darkness has penetrated his heart. He's a very realistic person in that way. It doesn't come across as cartoony. And yet all of a sudden, he's turned into this Power Rangers monster of the week thing. And it was very frustrating for me. However, it's tied to another moment that is famous for how great it is. All I'm going to say is, you can't have my pain. Such a beautiful, cathartic moment. Mistborn Era 2, Shadows of Self. So Shadows of Self is a very tight-knit, character-focused narrative. And that's kind of why I like it so much. I think that Era 2 has some really great stuff going for it. It should not be overlooked. I was not a fan of Alloy of Law, the first book. I just wasn't buying the whole aesthetic. I think that if I reapproached it, that might change. I don't know. Shadows of Self is where it really hooked me. I started to actually care about Waxilian Ladrian. And the connection that he has with the antagonist Bleeder is so sophisticated. There are moments that are so heartbreaking. Sanderson was leveling up with his characters here. They have another character named Milan, who I think was the #1 most interesting concept of a character that I think I may have ever come across. They're a Khandra, which is this creature in the Mistborn universe that can change its shape. They build up this person's identity, even though their identity has changed several times in the past, and they have this sort of relationship with another character, and you wonder about, what are the implications of that? It's really cool. It's a really cool story. I love tragic stuff. Number 6, we have another entry in the Mistborn series, and that is The Final Empire, which is the first Mistborn book. This is one that actually I tried to read twice before I actually dove into it. I think I just wasn't ready for it just yet. I didn't know what to expect, but I think that structurally, this book was so awesome. If you go back and rewatch Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope, after you haven't seen it in a while, you know what's coming, but somehow it tends to deliver more than you expect. Now, with this book, you get to a certain point where there's a main character's death, and it feels like that's it. That's what's happening in this book. Now they're going to have to spend the entire trilogy taking down the bad guy and pulling everyone together. A Lord of the Rings trilogy thing where eventually we'll get to Return of the King and they'll finally get to Mount Doom. And instead Sanderson decided to pull the Mount Doom thing at the end of the first book. So you just have this exceeding of expectations right off the bat. And I thought that was so awesome. And it was what made me jump from the first to the second to the third book. Speaking of pushing through that trilogy, number 5 is The Hero of Ages. Now, this is what I wish Wind and Truth was. A Hero of Ages has such an amazing climax. It has such an amazing resolution. Just like the first book, it exceeds all of your expectations. It pushes you to the apocalypse of this planet that you've come to understand so well. And Sanderson isn't afraid of playing with and disposing of each and every piece that you have grown attached to. And it is just phenomenal. It is a phenomenal work. There are characters that were initially introduced in the first book that I wasn't so hot on, that eventually became my favorites. And you get like a taste of a wider universe. This is where the Cosmere works. I know I had some negative things to say about the Cosmere in my Wind and Truth video. That doesn't mean that I think this shared universe itself was a bad idea. I think that they've been taking advantage of it in the wrong ways. Number 4, yes, we're sticking in the Mistborn series. Now, Era 2 sort of has 2 different climaxes, it feels like, because there are 4 books. You start off, Mistborn Era 1 is a trilogy, and the second one you got 4 books. So it feels a little asymmetrical. You can tell that Sanderson was planning on the 3rd book in the second era of Mistborn to be the last one in that sequence. But then he eventually did Lost Metal, and I enjoy Lost Metal. However, I think that Bands of Mourning is a better climax than Lost Metal. It really does just read itself. It's such a cool adventure. It feels almost like Indiana Jones. I was initially a very hard sell because of Alloy of Law, but second era of Mistborn, you watch Sanderson nail his character work. This is so much better than Shadows of Self. I mean, from book 2 to book 3, things really expanded, and you get to really know his characters. Milan, Wax, we haven't even talked about Wayne yet. I love Wayne. I think Wayne's a great character. At Lost Metal, he leans almost a little too much on Wayne, I feel like. I think he had a more comfortable position in Bands of Mourning. I think Bands of Mourning is just a better novel overall. Okay, that brings us to my top 3 Sanderson books. And number 3 is Words of Radiance. Another one that might piss people off. A lot of people were probably expecting this to be number 1. I love Words of Radiance. It's a perfect follow-up to The Way of Kings. A perfect expansion on the world of Roshar. The famous Sanderlanche is so good. This is when I think he's stuck that particular aspect of the story probably the second best. Towards the end, I constantly thought this character would die or that character would die. Everyone felt like they were in supreme danger. This is a book that Sanderson didn't write just to write. He really loved writing this book at the time, and it comes across that way. He was immersed in this world, and so we are immersed in that world. It had nothing to do with his reception. He wasn't thinking about, oh, people will think this about that. No, he was just offering a universe for us to step into, and damn, it was a cool universe. Variables introduced in the debut are extrapolated on brilliantly, and characters are fleshed out in surprising but natural and believable ways. I mean, the clashing storms, Adolin fighting for his life. We can't continue without talking about Szeth. Szeth was such a real threat, and one that you almost want to see succeed. He's always been this really tragic character, and yes, Wind and Truth fumbled him, but it doesn't ruin what happened in Words of Radiance. You see Szeth at his most dangerous. He's coming across the majority of the main cast, and you don't know who he's going to kill. He's got a sword that can kill anybody. While Oathbringer, things got a little cartoony towards the end, and that resulted in a couple of serious issues that I had. I also feel like this one kind of took those elements but did it right. Things got just Dragon Ball Z enough. You have Kaladin flying around and fighting Zeth in the air with their freaking wind powers and fighting with their magic swords and shit, and it was so badass. It was so good. It was so epic. I mean, I think it really is a flawless work. It's just that these next two books are even better. So number 2, I love The Way of Kings. It is one of my favorite novels. It really does have some magic to it. This book really does have soul to it. Kaladin pulling himself out of that chasm when everything in his life is just so thoroughly awful, piling more weight on his back purposefully to get himself through this seemingly impossible endeavor. Everything that occurs in Bridge 4 is so significant and so dear to me. Later works are unfair to this book. I think that they should be better because this book is something very, very special. Some people read this after reading other forms of fantasy and expect a more complex prose, where the prose itself is a bit more beautiful. You get some lines that really speak to you, but Sanderson's writing isn't about line by line. It's about what occurs. He's documenting what these characters are doing, but it's done in a way to where just the very fact of what they're doing is enough. The characters' actions are enough. The slow sections of this book didn't seem like bloat. There was nothing excessive about this. They were essential in ramping you up towards each moment of supreme relief. I mean, everything with Kaladin, everything with Dalinar, everything with Adolin, everything with Shallan. I liked Shallan quite a bit in this book. I liked her entire arc here. The whole tension of her trying to steal this magic fabrial, this artifact that can do all sorts of things. This is a book that deserves the epically long word count because it itself is epic. My number 1 pick is Warbreaker. Warbreaker is the most significant Sanderson book in my life. It was the first book that I read of his. I could talk about the magic system, how colors and breath play a part in everyone's subjective daily experience in this world, or I could talk about how Vivenna and Ciri are such profoundly distinct voices that Sanderson captures effortlessly and perfectly. Or I could talk about my personal experience with this and how my ex-girlfriend used to have me read this to her for hours and hours, and it was probably the healthiest moment of our relationship. Every time I'd stop, she would tell me to keep reading. We wouldn't be able to stop. We would read for 5 or 6 hours at a time, and we'd come back, and that eventually led to reading another book, and reading another book, and reading another book. And it was just a very dear moment to me, regardless of whatever may have changed, whatever might have happened in life. I still hold that memory as something very special. Warbreaker is such an immensely good novel. For more on my journey as an author and all things science fiction and fantasy, subscribe to Steller Reads.